And especially to our officiating director, Professor Parmeshwar Iyer. Thank you so very much for joining us in person, for giving us your time and participation. As you know by now, 14th February is very appropriately the date on which the IUPAC Global Women's Breakfast is taken, perhaps with a whimsical nod to the Philosophical Breakfast Club that led to important advances in science and technology in the 19th century. This breakfast is held in conjunction with the United Nations Day of Women and Girls in Science, and the goal of the GWB series is to establish an active network of people of all genders to overcome the barriers to gender equality in science. GWB is also a flagship event of the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development, bringing together people from all science disciplines. The theme of this year's GWB is Breaking Barriers in Science. Groups from all types of science organizations, from high schools to scientific societies, universities, companies, governments, and non-governmental organizations are invited to host events. And if you visit the official website, the link of which is given in your email invitation and on the poster, you will see an exciting map indicating the geographical range of this event. Last year, 407 breakfasts took place around the world in 78 different countries, including 12 first-time countries: Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Honduras, Iceland, Kuwait, Mauritania, Moldova, Namibia, Poland, Trinidad and Tobago, and Uzbekistan. This year, we are proud to say that IIT Guwahati will join the conversation. Given this year's theme, it seems entirely fitting that the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences would take an active role in breaking barriers and bringing together scholars and researchers from all the academic disciplines that this institute nurtures, and some from other institutions of the Northeast. The objective is to develop a global professional network through 2 invited lectures. The invited speakers involved with the program will briefly talk about the initiatives, followed by stories of the Global Women's Breakfast and a brainstorming session. This year, we have selected a theme on gender equality in workplaces. So, without further ado, let me invite Professor Iyer, our officiating director, to say a few words to get us started. Yes, sir. Yeah. If you would like to come here. Okay, thank you.
So very good morning to you all. And I think it's a great opportunity for me to be part of this event. Sorry, I was a little late. There was another event going on the MedTech Kickstart event at IIT Guwahati. So I'm a little late. Apologies for that. So once again, welcome you all to IIT Guwahati. And this event, I think it's a very special event, as Dr. Basu mentioned. First time IIT Guwahati is organizing this event, the UN Day of Women and Girls in Science. And definitely this breakfast terminology, or, I was also not aware about, the IUPAC.
Yes.
Despite being from chemistry, the IUPAC organizes, this event. So it's a eye-opener for me also. I'm happy that my colleague, one of my colleagues, Dr. Sumana, is here, and probably she will be speaking also, I think, as one of the speakers. So I think it's a great opportunity for IIT Guwahati to be hosting this event. As an institute, we have been doing quite well to incorporate a lot of different fields, a lot of different aspects of education, not just engineering, as IIT is a non-engineering and technology, but we have truly become a very multidisciplinary institute. In fact, the event that I just came back from, it's mainly led by the healthcare sector. Okay, so the medical science is also coming up in a big way. So this event, as you mentioned already, that we have this, basic sciences. So definitely social sciences, the medical sciences. Definitely we have physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics already existing in the institute. And if you all the guests who are present here, if you have time, definitely go and take time and visit other schools, other centers. We have 11 departments, we have 9 academic centers, and we have 5 different schools. So where a lot of interdisciplinary work led by sciences, definitely, and all the centers, if you see, we have a lot of involvement of also humanities faculties. And I'm very happy to share with you all that IIT Guwahati, though we are doing are best in a lot of areas. One area which is really quantifiable, which we are really very happy to share with all, is the research output of this institute has really been very, very good. And we have close to 450 faculties. The number of publications that we have achieved the last year is close to 2,500. So more than 4.5, and that's one of the best in the world, in fact. Okay, 4.5 to 5, and that directly reflects in one of the quantifiable quantities of all the research citations. So we do some work, and usually our work gets cited by other scientists across the world, and the research citation per faculty, IIT Guwahati, is among the best in the world. In the nation, we are number 2 after IISc. We are the best among the IITs, and in the world, we are 37th ranked. And if you see the top the universities in the 37th, we are definitely doing very, very good. Another aspect I would like to highlight that has been initiated by the humanities department is I see one of the topics here, International Year of Basic Sciences, was sustainable development, that was mentioned here. And humanities and social science department is leading the institute in offering a course on sustainable development goals, on implementing the SDG goals, and that is a compulsory course offered to all the UG students of IIT Guwahati. And this is again a very unique example where 9 different departments have come together. We have around 13 faculty members from different departments who are offering this course. So another very nice example where the institute is putting effort to implement the SDG goals. The one last point that I would like to highlight, as the institute is growing, the number of students definitely is growing at a rapid pace, along with the other aspects. And today we have more than 8,200 students. And I'm very happy to share with you all that 24% of the students is female. So gender barrier that we are looking to break is coming up in a very, very big way. And even healthier number is even that 8,200 number, the other number which has directly flipped right now is the PG and the PhD students. That has now become 52% in the institute. We have only 48% UG students. And in the PhD students, we have close to 2,000. We have crossed 2,500 students, and even that number, 33% are female. So we are really trying to break that barriers, encourage more female into all levels of education. In BTech, we are anyway doing through a special pool where we are admitting students. But even in PhD, we are very fortunate to have the best talent and female. In fact, one of the biggest challenges we are facing today is that we don't have accommodation for our female students. If there are wardens and all, here, that is one issue that we are facing. Definitely, we are trying to address the problems and make this campus a better place for females. So definitely, this kind of event, this kind of interaction will encourage, break the barriers, and hopefully, we'll have a better campus, better ideas, better suggestions which we can implement at the institute level. So all the speakers, all the participants who have come here for this event, once again, welcome to IIT Guwahati, and hopefully you will have a very fruitful interaction today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Iyer. Very uplifting remarks. I'm sure all of us are enthused by it. So I would now like to invite Professor Prajval Shastri, who gave us a fascinating talk on black holes in the physics department yesterday, to talk about this initiative. We will take questions and comments from the audience and participants at the end of the 2 invited lectures, and then we shall carry on with more speakers from several locations who have joined us online in the Northeast and from our own institute in the brainstorming session afterwards. Let me introduce Professor Shastri before she starts speaking. So Professor Shastri is an astrophysicist of over 4 decades and investigates the physics of giant black holes that are found in the centers of distant galaxies using telescopes at multiple frequencies based on Earth as well as in space. She got her PhD from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and after postdoctoral research positions in the University of Texas at Austin, University of California at Berkeley, and the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, she was a faculty of the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Bengaluru, for 23 years. She has been a Fulbright Fellow at Stanford University and is currently Emeritus Scientist at the Raman Research Institute and Adjunct Professor at the International Center for Radio Astronomy Research, Australia. She is extremely passionate about science outreach. She believes that the cultivation of scientific thinking is for everyone, uses astrophysics as a vehicle to engage lay audiences of all ages with these questions, and works for the People's Science Movement towards this goal. She's also deeply concerned about the inequities in the sciences and attempts to bring an intersectional lens to the endeavors to mitigate them. She is the founder and past chair of the Gender in Physics Working Group of the Indian Physics Association and a past member of the Working Group for Gender Equity of the Astronomical Society of India. She is vice chair of the Women in Physics Working Group of the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics and vice chair of the Executive Committee for the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development. In addition to her research publications and popular articles on astrophysics, her published work includes writings on gender inequity as well as science and society. And with that, I will now ask Professor Shastri to please share her talk with us.
Good morning and thank you very, very much. It's a real pleasure to give a second talk during my first visit to IIT Guwahati, your beautiful campus. And thank you to everyone for participating in this. So I will start by asking the question, how do we de-gender our science practice? By that I mean, how do we make a gender not a salient factor in our science practice? And I think over the years, having thought about this question, I feel that there is a certain mindset that will better position us to address the question, which is, I think, encapsulated by this quote by Lilla Watson from the Aboriginal activist group in Australia. And she says, if you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So I do think that when we think about the marginalization of certain groups of people because of some kind of group identity, this is the mindset which will take us forward. So why is there a gender gap in science? I should say that I'm really happy that we will have both a sort of outsider to science practice talk here after me, and we will have individuals tell their stories, because I think that there are limitations to just looking at data and seeing what we infer from the data, which is what scientists like me want to do. But nevertheless, I will present some data just to give a sense of where we are on that front. So if we ask the question, why is there a gender gap in science? And one of the sort of hidden subtexts in a lot of people's minds is this question, are women less competent in science? However, there was a survey by Neelam Kumar published as early as in 2001, where she surveyed 4 scientific institutions and compared the scientific productivity of men and women scientists. She found that there was no productivity deficit among the women. There was a survey of qualifications by Subramanian published in 2014, where she found no qualification deficit among the women. There were more women rank holders among women scientists employed in scientific institutions, and there were fewer women of lower university rank. So that is, shall we say, off the table. Another idea which is often put forward is that, we have to start when they're young. We have to start in high school. And people claim that there is a lack of interest in science among girls. Now, this is an idea that has been propounded all over the world, and perhaps in some cultures it is also true. But in India, if we look at the data, if we look at the prestigious Inspire fellowships which are awarded to 12th standard graduates in order to study science in BSc and masters. More than 50% of those scholarships are won by women in all sciences, and 50% are won by women in physics. And if we look at the statistics for the Indian Academy of Sciences summer fellowships, which are awarded to undergraduate and master's students, more than 50% are won by women. So this certainly does not suggest that there is a lack of interest in science among girls, which would mean that the same thing is true of women's enrollment in science. So which would mean that, you know, these kinds of initiatives, which sound very warm and fuzzy, having science camps for girls and attracting girls to science and so on, they're really barking up the wrong tree, at least in India. I want to point out this very interesting study which was published in Current Science in 2018 by Malhotra and Joshi, where they tested certain perceptions about studying science among students from 4 high schools in Dehradun. And so they asked the question, is it true that fewer girls than boys are interested in higher studies in science and maths? And more boys than girls said yes. So boys I represent by red and girls by blue. More girls than boys said no, and more boys than girls said don't know. Similarly, they asked, science and maths is difficult and girls go for easier subjects. How true is this? And again, more boys than girls said yes. So certainly it seems that boys are socialized, even by our education system, or despite our education system, to think that girls are incompetent in science. So if at all we have programs to intervene in this problem for younger people, I think we need to have programs for all genders, where the programs not only include things related to science and experiments and learning by doing and all of that, but also which try to dismantle this perception that gender is somehow linked to either competence or interest in science. So everyone, regardless of their gender, needs to learn that all people can do science. Now, to go back to that study by Neelam Kumar, where she found that there was no productivity deficit among women scientists compared to men scientists. Despite this, she found that women were systematically lower in the hierarchy in the science institutions, and the average age of women who were professors or equivalent was significantly higher than those for men. And she concluded that indeed there is discrimination within the profession. So it is a flawed meritocracy. So then why is there a gender gap in science? The cause lies within and in our unscientific science practice, ironic as that sounds. And I would like to also say that the gender gap, I think, is a symptom of barriers within science practice along other dimensions. So, for example, caste, or the hegemony of English language, competence, and so on. So, what is the way forward? I think it's instructive to think about how interventions have been designed so far. So there remain many who do not feel welcome and included. And so the interventions largely seem to rest on helping them, helping the marginalized, even when that helping is framed in a sort of equity framework, that interventions need to be equitable, so the marginalized are given a higher ladder, so to speak. That is still missing the obvious, which in this case is the bent tree. So we really need to fix the bent tree rather than give the marginalized group a higher ladder, right? So we don't want this. And we don't want this either, because in the gender dimension, this amounts to fixing the women, and there is nothing wrong with the women. It is that certain groups of people, such as women, are being pushed back rather than, they needing some sort of a push in order to come ahead. So we do need to look at the evidence, and what we really need to be doing is to fix the tree, the bent tree. So unless the systemic problem is acknowledged, change will be too slow and at a huge cost. But among Indian scientists, typically, while there is acknowledgement that there is gender disparity, there is not an acknowledgement that there is gender discrimination within. And furthermore, while we design interventions, we have to be mindful that all of us, regardless of our gender, are brought up to accept sexist thought and sexist action. And so that becomes really important when interventions are designed. So with all this in mind, we propose to the Indian Physics Association, which is the National Professional Society of Physicists, to constitute a Gender in Physics working group. We did that on Women's Day 2016. They approved the launch of it in 2017, a year later. And one of the highlights of the activities of this working group was a national conference called Pressing for Progress, which was organized in the University of Hyderabad. It was a first of its kind conference. It had about 200 physicists and about 40 practitioners from other disciplines, such as sociology, education, even theatre practice, and so on, who all sat together and deliberated about the problem of gender inequity in physics. And we launched something called the Hyderabad Charter for Gender Equity in Physics in this conference, with a lot of inputs from the participants in the conference. So this charter has, of course, certain very, very obvious fundamental principles. People of all genders have equal potential to excel in all aspects of physics practice. Utilizing the talents of all is essential for the physics enterprise to achieve its full potential. So we talked about physics because this was about the problem in physics. It was an Indian Physics Association initiative, but it is, of course, not necessarily restricted to physics, although I have to say that physics is one of the disciplines in which the gender gap is among the worst in academia. It has a bunch of guiding principles. I won't go through all of them, but I will highlight a few, and that is followed in the charter by a bunch of recommendations. So among the guiding principles, we say closing the quantitative gender gap at all levels of physics practice is a necessary step to achieve equality, but it's not sufficient. We say the practice of physics is a social activity, and addressing its gender bias requires insight from the social sciences. So I think this has been one of the weaknesses of a lot of efforts towards gender equity in the sciences in India, that the practitioners of science have championed the cause. However, they have sort of been oblivious to the enormous scholarship that is there in the social sciences on the question of inequity, and also also been oblivious to the sort of strong insights from the feminist movement in India, which is also at a fairly advanced level. We say that when a process of selection within science practice reduces the gender fraction from that in the pool, it is a signature of a biased process. So the interventions and strategies must be such that they do not endorse societal patriarchy. I think this is really important. So for example, rather than advocate for increase in maternity leave, we should try and convert maternity leave into parental leave. and not make it only for women. Similarly, there is often this is advocated, let's have flexible working hours for women. And I think it's important to not do that, but to instead have flexible work hours for all as part of an initiative of work-life balance, or however you want to call it, for all. It's also, of course, important that institutions must assume immediate and ongoing responsibility to move towards gender equality. The onus should not be on groups who are the marginalized, whether it's women or on any other dimension, because equality is everyone's work, and more so the work of institutional leadership. So we say in the charter, criteria for hiring should be formulated beforehand, meaning before initiating the process, and there should be no hidden norms or hidden criteria that should be used. Even as we speak, we still have institutions in India, including elite Indian institutions, which will disqualify meritorious women candidates just because they have a spouse or a boyfriend just in the institution. So, and this will never be stated in the advertisement. So in that sense, it is a hidden norm. However, transparency and accountability in governance is really, really necessary in order for us to have an equitable science practice. And so that's why we highlight this, because it's very common still today. Institutions, we say, should invest in diversity officers as observers on selection, hiring, and promotion committee. How much time do I have? It's very common nowadays, and there's even government regulation that committees should have women on them. The point is that that is a good thing to do because it's a right thing to do. But it is not necessarily going to solve the problem we have at hand. So it is important to have gender diversity on all committees, but not necessarily to address the problem of inequity. Because as I said before, all of us, regardless of our gender, are brought up to accept sexist thought and sexist action. So just by having a woman, that doesn't mean that the process will be equitable. Diversity officers, on the other hand, have expertise in diversity, so they should be there. There is another problem today with meeting this regulation of there should be women on every committee, especially in institutions, maybe not in institutions like IIT Guwahati, but in institutions where there are very, very few women. So already the women face discrimination at many, many levels, insidiously. On top of that, they are overburdened with needing to serve on a whole bunch of committees because there are so few of them. And so then it becomes a double burden. And of course, they don't get acknowledgement for that extra work that they have to put in. They are still expected to meet the requirements of promotion and hiring and so on as usual. So that is why we recommend that diversity officers is the way forward. So we suggest that these recommendations that are in the charter should be debated locally in each institution and fine-tuned or questioned or modified or whatever for the classroom, for the department, for conferences, for editorial boards, and for outreach and exhibitions and so on. So some examples. So for example, does an institution, when it comes to felicitation of honored guests, are only the women asked to kind of quote unquote dress up and give flowers to the honored guests? Language changes. For example, use men and women instead of male and female because that encapsulates the idea that gender is a social construct rather than focusing on the biology. So gender, this institution has a very strong humanities department. I think I don't need to explain what is meant by a social construct. But we feel that men, women encapsulates that idea better than just saying male and female. Don't require to know the marital status of members of staff. I did check the IIT Guwahati website and I didn't find this anywhere, so that's a nice thing. But there are many institutions even to this day which will tag their members by their marital status if they are women. And then, of course, have this sort of language thing, which is a small thing. People often dismiss it, but that's so small, why are you making a big deal out of it? But I think it does influence how we think. So use personnel instead of manpower, humankind instead of mankind, etc. Another sort of thought is that for the gender box, which is usually used in, for instance, conference registrations and so on, rather than just have a bland box saying gender, if we have a box saying what gender do you identify with, and have multiple options such as these, which is perhaps a step, it's not necessarily perfect, but perhaps it's a step towards being welcoming of all genders. So, equality education, we feel, is particularly important for the gatekeepers, namely institution leaders, deans, directors, journal editors. Telescope time allocation committee is there because I'm an astrophysicist, and that's another very common arena for discrimination. Conference SOC chairs and funding agency directors. So everyone needs to also learn about inappropriate behavior, and some of these cartoons sort of illustrate that. You can perhaps not read the text. So the cartoon on the left was published in a magazine called Resonance, which is a science magazine for undergraduate level people, where it says there is a report which says there is a paucity of women in leadership roles, which is at the bottom, and then the person near the board says type B should not talk so much in meetings and express opinions. It makes them difficult to get along with. The second cartoon has this man saying, "Excuse me, ladies, could you tell me where the selection committee members are?" And of course, the women say, "Here we are." And the last one, I'm sure you've seen it many times. The chair of the meeting is saying, "That's an excellent suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the women would like to make it." And this is an experience that several of us who are women in science have encountered many, many times. Each time it seems like a small thing and to be dismissed, but then it becomes part of the climate. Equality education is particularly important for mentors. This, I think, is not emphasized enough. I mean, the number of people who have told me, number of women who have told me that as young people, they were told that either science is not for them, or physics is not for them, or they should take some easier course. I even heard a recent thing, computational astrophysics has been a modern development in the last few decades with the advancement in computation. And I've even heard young women giving advice that why don't you do computational astrophysics? You can run your program and it'll take a couple of hours to run, so then you can go and do all your home care jobs. So it is really, really, I think, important that mentors, which is us, which is, professors, and that we undergo education so that we don't give biased, quote-unquote, advice to young people. I want to point out that this is Andrea Ghez, who is an astrophysicist in UCLA, and she discovered a giant black hole in the center of our Milky Way through very persistent observations in Hawaii on a mountaintop over many decades, and she won the Nobel Prize in 2020 along with two others for physics, and she was the fourth woman only to get the Nobel Prize in physics. And she has talked about her own experience growing up, or not growing up, but growing up and in academia. And she said, I grew up hearing the word no all the time. You're a girl, you can't do it. You're a girl, there is no way you can get into MIT. There is no way you can get into Caltech. I have actually heard colleagues, my own colleagues, tell they'll tell young men, yeah, that's, if you stick with your passion, go for it, and etc. And to the young women, they will say, but you need to work very hard, you need to manage your family and your science. And I've never heard anybody tell a young man that they need to work hard and manage their family and their science. So I think we really, really need to change that. And that will only happen if senior academics undergo equality education. So I just want to end with saying, if you would like to endorse the Hyderabad Charter, do go through it and write me an email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Shastri, for that absolutely enlightening and so spot on point remarks.